All right, so today we're going deep on something super important, especially if you're renting here in California.
Definitely important.
5 common landlord tricks tenants should know.
Oh, yeah.
We've got briefing documents, FAQs, even a whole study guide on California landlord-tenant law.
Wow.
To make sure you know what you need to know. And this is really key for California specifically, right? Because we're talking about what folks like the attorneys over at martinezlawcenter.com specialize in. Tenant rights in Orange County, Riverside, San Diego, Los Angeles.
Oh, the major areas.
Renting can be, well, a little bit complicated sometimes.
Yeah.
And you really need to understand your rights to be on solid ground.
Absolutely. I think, what's important from the start is to realize that we're not trying to paint all landlords as bad.
Right.
But we want to equip tenants with the knowledge to make sure their rights are being respected.
For sure.
Under California law.
Level the playing field a little bit.
Exactly.
So let's talk about maybe one of the biggest things that can go wrong in a rental situation. Eviction.
Eviction, yeah.
And it seems like some landlords might try to get around the proper legal process.
Yeah, and I think that's, trick number 1 that we're talking about today is these illegal eviction tactics.
Okay.
And the reason a lot of times landlords try to get around the legal process is because it's costly. It's time consuming.
Makes sense.
And they think that there's an easier way. And the truth is that exposes them to much more liability.
Okay.
One of the things is like turning off utilities.
Oh, wow.
Water, electricity, gas, things like that, or, physically locking a tenant out of their home or going in and removing all of their belongings.
I mean, that sounds terrifying to come home and not be able to get in.
It's absolutely terrifying. And, California law is very clear.
Okay.
The only way to evict a tenant legally in California is by filing an unlawful detainer lawsuit in court.
Got it.
And so what that means is they have to serve a written notice. And then if the issue isn't resolved, they have to file a lawsuit and have that lawsuit served on the tenant, which is the summons and complaint.
Okay.
It's basically saying, hey, you're being sued.
Yeah.
And there's no, changing the locks while someone's at work. There's no turning off utilities.
So they can't just decide you're out.
Exactly. And the briefing materials talk about how landlords who do engage in these tactics face serious penalties.
Really?
Cutting off utilities, for example, is actually a misdemeanor.
Wow.
That's how serious it is.
So what should someone actually do if they're in this situation?
The first and most important thing is to document everything.
Okay.
Keep a record of when the utilities were turned off, when the locks were changed, any communication that you've had with the landlord.
Makes sense.
The second thing is communicate in writing.
Okay.
Whether it's email or a certified letter, but clearly stating, hey, these actions that you're taking are illegal under California law.
Got it.
And stop them immediately. And then the third thing, which is probably the most important, is to seek legal advice immediately.
Yeah, I was going to say, this sounds like a time to call a lawyer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, organizations like Law Help CA or attorneys like the ones at martinezlawcenter.com
right.
can provide that immediate guidance that you need.
So, okay, let's say the landlord is trying to follow the legal process for eviction.
Okay.
And it starts with those eviction notices.
Yes, those are important.
But it sounds like those can have problems too.
Yeah. So this is trick number 2, improper eviction notices.
Okay.
And this is where the details really matter.
Okay.
So California has very specific legal requirements for these notices.
Got it.
It's not just a suggestion, it's legal requirements.
So what are the big things someone should look for when they get one of these notices?
So the content has to be very precise.
Okay.
So for example, if it's a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit,
right.
it has to say the exact amount of rent that's owed, the exact time period that it covers, and exactly how and to whom the rent should be paid.
So very specific.
Very specific.
Got it.
And it also has to clearly explain that if you fail to pay within those 3 days, you have to move out.
Okay.
Then there's the issue of service.
Okay.
So the law says you have to be served in a specific way.
Okay.
Whether it's personal service or substituted service, where they leave a copy with someone at your home and also mail you a copy.
Got it.
And then the timelines are also very strict.
Okay.
3 days means 3 full days, weekends, and holidays don't count.
So if they mess up any of that,
then you may have a valid defense to the eviction case, because the court can throw out the case.
Really?
Even for a small mistake.
Wow.
The wrong date or the wrong amount of rent owed can be enough to throw out the case.
So you really need to look at these with a fine-tooth comb.
Absolutely. And that's where legal advice can come in handy, because they can tell you, hey, this is a valid defense or it's not a valid defense.
Right. Don't just panic right away. Take a look.
Exactly.
Figure out what's going on.
Exactly.
So the third thing we're talking about is why a landlord might be evicting someone in the first place.
Okay.
And it sounds like there are some rules around that too.
Yeah. So this is trick number 3.
Okay.
Evictions without just cause.
All right, just cause. What does that mean?
Well, so California law and the Tenant Protection Act provides certain protections for tenants, especially if you've lived in the unit for 12 months or more.
Okay.
And in most situations, the landlord needs just cause to evict you.
Got it.
So the law distinguishes between at fault and no fault reasons for eviction.
Okay.
At fault reasons are those that are tied to your actions as a tenant.
Makes sense.
So, failure to pay rent, violating the lease agreement, causing damage to the property beyond normal wear and tear, or engaging in illegal activities.
So like breaking a window or something.
Exactly.
So what about no-fault evictions? I know our materials didn't really go super deep on this.
Yeah, they didn't go in a whole lot of detail, but
What are some examples, though?
so no-fault evictions are those that aren't really related to the tenant's behavior.
Okay.
So a landlord deciding to take the property off the rental market, for example, or needing to move into the unit themselves.
Okay.
But those often have different requirements like relocation assistance and things like that.
Interesting.
And so it's important to understand your rights in those situations as well.
Okay.
But one thing that's really important to know is that lying about any reason for eviction is illegal.
So if they say, I didn't pay rent and I have proof that I did,
Exactly.
or they make up some lease violation,
Exactly.
they're in trouble.
That's a huge problem for them.
Okay, so it's really important to understand these valid reasons for eviction.
Yes,
And if you think the reason they're giving you is not legit, you can challenge it.
absolutely. And present your evidence to the court.
That makes sense. So let's talk about something that affects pretty much everyone who rents security deposits,
Yeah.
because there can be some tricky stuff there too.
There can be.
So trick number 4, improper handling of security deposits.
So this is a really common area where disputes arise.
Okay.
So you really need to know what your rights are as a tenant.
For sure.
The first thing is, what's the security deposit supposed to cover in California?
Yeah.
It's basically for unpaid rent, for damage to the property beyond normal wear and tear,
Got it.
cleaning necessary to restore the unit to the condition it was in when you moved in,
Okay.
and then if it's stated in the lease, to replace certain items of personal property.
So like if the tenant breaks a window
Exactly.
or leaves the place a total mess,
Exactly.
then the security deposit can be used for that.
Right. Those would be legitimate deductions.
Okay.
But the law limits how much a landlord can charge for a security deposit in the first place.
Okay. How much?
So for unfurnished, it's no more than 2 times the monthly rent.
Okay.
For furnished, it's no more than 3 times the monthly rent.
Got it.
And those non-refundable security deposits that you sometimes see,
Right.
those are absolutely illegal in California.
Good to know. So what happens when you move out?
Okay.
What are the landlord's responsibilities?
So within 21 calendar days, after you move out and the landlord regains possession of the property, they have to return your security deposit,
The full amount.
the full amount, unless they're making lawful deductions.
Okay.
And if they are making deductions,
Yeah.
they have to provide you with an itemized statement
Okay.
that explains exactly what was deducted and why.
Okay.
And for anything over $126, they have to provide supporting documentation, like receipts for repairs or estimates.
Makes sense. And what if they just don't return it or they make deductions that seem unfair?
If a landlord wrongfully withholds your security deposit in bad faith.
What does bad faith mean?
So bad faith basically means they have no legitimate reason to keep the security deposit,
Okay.
and they could be liable for up to twice the amount of the security deposit as a penalty,
Wow.
in addition to returning the original amount.
Okay, so that's a pretty strong incentive for them to do it right.
It is.
So what can tenants do to protect themselves when it comes to security deposits?
Documentation is key. When you move in, take photos and videos of the entire property and note any pre-existing damage,
Got it.
and do the same thing when you move out.
Okay.
You should also consider sending a written request to your landlord for a pre-move-out inspection.
Okay.
So you can walk through the property together, identify any issues, and address them before you move out.
That's smart.
And then be aware of the legal limitations on deductions
Okay.
and the 21-day deadline for the return of the deposit.
Got it. So keep track of all that.
Exactly. If you don't receive it within 21 days, or if the deductions seem unjustified, communicate with your landlord in writing
Right.
immediately.
Okay.
State your concerns, request clarification, or the return of the disputed amount.
And if you don't get anywhere?
If you don't get anywhere, then seek legal advice.
Okay, so the last common landlord trick we're going to talk about sounds particularly stressful.
Yes.
Landlord harassment. So
Yeah.
what does that mean?
So landlord harassment is basically any repeated actions by a landlord that are intended to disturb your peace and quiet, annoy you, intimidate you, or try to force you to move out illegally.
So they're trying to make you so miserable that you leave on your own
Exactly.
without going through eviction.
Right.
What are some examples of that?
So it could be things like illegally entering your unit without proper notice or a valid reason,
Okay.
except in emergencies.
Right.
It could be cutting off your utilities, changing the locks on your doors,
You talked about that?
making threats, engaging in persistent and unwarranted demands or intimidation,
Wow.
failing to make necessary repairs, or imposing huge unreasonable rent increases.
So they're really trying to make your life hard.
Exactly.
And illegal.
Exactly.
What can tenants do if this is happening to them?
So California law provides protections against landlord harassment.
Okay, good.
You can seek legal remedies, including civil damages.
Okay.
And the sources say you could recover up to $2,000 per violation,
Wow.
depending on the circumstances.
So that's significant.
Yeah, and you're also protected from retaliation
Okay.
if you report harassment or assert your other tenant rights.
Got it.
And as we talked about before, cutting off your utilities to force you out is a misdemeanor.
Okay, so again, serious consequences.
Serious consequence.
So what should someone do if they're experiencing harassment from their landlord?
Document everything.
Okay.
Keep a record of every instance of harassment,
Mm-hmm.
the dates, the times what happened, and if there were any witnesses.
Got it.
Communicate with your landlord in writing,
Okay.
email or certified mail, stating that their behavior constitutes harassment under California law
Okay.
and demand that they stop.
Got it.
You can also file complaints with local housing authorities or tenant rights organizations.
Okay.
And seeking legal advice from a tenant rights attorney is essential.
Yeah, I was going to say, this seems like another good time to call a lawyer.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Can we quickly recap the key takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, so the most important things are know your rights as a tenant in California.
Right.
Document everything.
Yes.
Communicate with your landlord in writing whenever possible.
Okay.
Understand the legal procedures for eviction and the rules about security deposits.
Got it.
And don't hesitate to seek legal assistance if you feel like your rights are being violated.
Absolutely. And what kind of resources are out there for California tenants who need help?
So there are a lot of resources available.
Okay, good.
Many courts have self-help centers that provide legal information and guidance.
Okay.
You can also check out Law Help CA.
Law Help CA.
Yeah, it's a great website that helps you find legal aid organizations and low-cost legal services in your area.
Got it.
And your local county law library can also be a great resource.
Okay.
And then, of course, tenant rights attorneys like the ones at martinezlawcenter.com
Right.
can provide expert legal advice and representation.
Especially in Orange County, Riverside, San Diego, Los Angeles.
Exactly.
So the bottom line is be proactive.
Yes.
Know your rights, document everything, and get help when you need it.
Absolutely.
Knowledge really is power when it comes to renting in California.
Absolutely. I mean, and, as a final thought,
Yeah.
every situation is unique.
Right.
But staying informed, being assertive about your rights, and knowing where to get help can make a huge difference.
For sure.
Not just for you, but for everyone renting in California.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all this information. This was really helpful.
You're welcome.
And to all our listeners out there, stay informed, stay safe, and know your rights.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
See you then.
Call now 714-442-9741. Thank you.